Welcome to the Explainer. So today we're tackling a feeling that, honestly, almost all of us have experienced lately, even if we didn't quite know what to call it. Okay, let's jump straight into this wildly counterintuitive finding from a fascinating 2026 study. It asked a pretty simple question. Who actually feels the most guilt when it comes to artificial intelligence? You might think you know the answer, but the data? It reveals something totally unexpected.
Let's look at a direct comparison between the two extremes. On one side, we have the heavy AI users. Now, you'd think these are the folks losing sleep over cutting corners, right? Actually, no. They report incredibly low moral distress. They kind of worked through all their complicated feelings months ago. But then, look at the other side, the AI avoiders. The people actively refusing to touch these tools are the ones scoring much, much higher on literally every single measure of guilt. High worry about their credibility, high anxiety about cheating, and this deep, deep fear of losing their edge. So if you've been feeling this strange psychological discomfort about AI, well, this completely validates exactly what you're going through.
Researchers have actually officially dubbed this the guilt paradox. The 2026 study lays it out perfectly. The people who don't use AI feel guiltier than the people who do. I mean, really think about that for a second. If you've ever hovered your mouse over the ChatGPT enter button, feeling this weird, unexplained sense of shame, or if you felt guilty for not using it while everyone else seems to be sprinting ahead, you've already lived this paradox.
All right, moving to section 1, not about cheating. When you hear the phrase AI guilt, where does your mind instantly go? I'd bet most of us immediately think of plagiarism, right? Cutting corners, breaking the academic or professional rules. But I want to ask you directly, is it really just a fear of getting caught? Because when researchers actually dug into the psychology of students and professionals, the fear of punishment, it was nowhere to be found.
They used a validated student instrument and actually identified 3 real dimensions to this guilt. First up, perceived laziness. People are asking themselves, am I becoming the kind of person who just can't do things on my own anymore? Second is the fear of judgment. If people knew I used AI for this, would they think less of me? And third, identity and self-efficacy. Now notice what's completely missing from this whole list. Fear of the principal's office. This isn't about getting a failing grade. This is a totally existential fear of losing your human edge.
And that third dimension? That is the deepest cut of all. Am I losing the ability to think? AI isn't just some convenient piece of software. It's acting like this massive psychological mirror, reflecting our absolute deepest performance anxieties. It makes us question if the work is actually still ours, and honestly, if we're slowly outsourcing our own competence.
And there is very real data fueling that identity crisis. To put it into perspective, look at this viral study of 26,000 students. When students used AI assistants, their homework score shot up by 18%. Great, right? Well, when it came time for the in-class exam, where they didn't have the AI, their scores plummeted by 20%. The AI did all the heavy lifting for the remembering, and the human brain simply never encoded the information. It's exactly that kind of scenario that fuels our internal fear of cognitive decline.
But, beyond just the fear of losing our skills, there's a huge environmental factor at play here. Ambiguity is the real driver of this guilt. This kind of shame just thrives in the dark. Think about it. Your school or company puts out a statement saying, hey, AI is fine as a tool. But then your professor or your boss implies through their tone that it is definitely not. All the while, you know perfectly well that all your peers are using it in secret. You're left totally alone in the dark to draw your own ethical lines, and naturally you feel terrible no matter where you end up drawing them.
Okay, section 2, the 4 types of AI guilt.
Notice how incredibly evenly split we are here, yet how few of us are actually at peace. We've got comfortable adopters at 27%. These are mostly senior folks who just see AI as a calculator and feel absolutely zero guilt. Cautious users make up 28%. They use it, but strictly within personal rules they've set for themselves. Then we have the guilty non-users at 29%. And finally, the morally distressed avoiders at 16%. So only about a quarter of people are genuinely comfortable. The vast majority of us are just stuck in some version of moral limbo.
Let's zoom in on that largest slice of the pie, the guilty non-users. This group is suffering from what researchers actually call anticipatory guilt. They're feeling terrible about something they haven't even done yet. They know AI exists, they kind of suspect they're falling behind by not using it, but the pure, unadulterated anxiety of starting keeps them entirely frozen in place. It's just a tragic loop of inaction and shame.
Then we have the most intense group, the morally distressed avoiders. Just listen to this incredibly stark quote from the study. I refuse to use AI. I won't let my thinking be influenced by what is created by a machine. Wow. For this 16% of the population, AI is definitely not a tool to be managed. They view it as a fundamental existential threat to their very identity as human thinkers.
Moving on to Section 3, the timeline of discomfort.
The really crucial point here is that this guilt actually follows a super predictable timeline. On day 1, the initial discomfort is at its absolute peak. You're feeling intense guilt and fear before you even really know how the tool works. But by week 2, there's this gradual realization. You start viewing the AI a bit less as a replacement for your brain and a bit more as like a rough draft machine. And by month 1 and beyond, you reach eventual comfort, basically because you have finally established clear personal boundaries for how you choose to use it.
But looking at this timeline, it reveals a pretty dangerous trap, which is perfectly summarized here. Fear of the transgression prevents the experience that resolves the fear. Because the guilt is so intensely bad at the very beginning, non-users and avoiders just back away entirely. And because they back away, they literally never make it to week 2 or month 1. They stay permanently anxious, totally stuck in moral distress, precisely because they're avoiding the initial discomfort required to actually figure the tool out.
Section 4. Overcoming AI guilt.
So thankfully, the researchers didn't just diagnose the guilt. They actually provided a super clean 5-step framework to eliminate the anxiety. Step 1, name it. Step 2, draw your own line out loud. Step 3, test the fear. Step 4, ask the mirror question. And Step 5, talk about it. All right, let's break down exactly how you can start applying these steps today.
Step 1 requires a complete reframing of the narrative in your head. Listen to this. Guilt isn't a sign you are doing something wrong. It's a sign you care about doing things right. Your discomfort is actually a massively positive signal. It proves that you haven't just mindlessly outsourced your judgment to a machine. So just recognizing that your guilt comes from a place of real integrity, that is the very first step to disarming it.
Now, steps 2, 3, and 5 become incredibly practical when we group them together. First, you have to vocalize your boundaries. Draw explicit personal rules. Like say it out loud. I will use AI for brainstorming, but absolutely never for the final draft. Next, test the fear. Try running a 30-day experiment on just one specific task to see if your fears of losing your edge actually match up with reality. Finally, you've got to stop the secrecy. The study found a massive link between guilt and hiding. Simply admitting to a colleague, hey, I used AI to outline this, it completely destroys the shame of the unknown.
And that brings us to step 4, which is arguably the most important of them all, the mirror question. Before you submit any work, before you hit send on that email or turn in that assignment, ask yourself, could I explain this to someone without the AI? Could I redo it from scratch if I was asked? This is the ultimate acid test. If the answer is yes, then your identity and your self-efficacy remain entirely intact. It is still your work.
Finally, Section 5, the real question.
Look, these tools are only getting more powerful. The lines are only going to get blurrier from here on out. So the really crucial point is this. The goal isn't to eliminate the discomfort, but to move through it honestly. You are totally allowed to feel weird about this massive technological shift. It's huge. But you have to stop punishing yourself for quietly figuring out your own boundaries, especially while the rest of the world is doing the exact same thing.
As you navigate this wild new world, I want to leave you with that ultimate acid test to reflect on. The next time you feel that wave of guilt creeping in, just look at the work in front of you and ask yourself honestly, could you explain this without the AI? Keep your cognitive boundaries strong, run your experiments, and hey, don't let the fear of a new tool stop you from learning how to master it. Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and keep asking those hard questions.